Whoa. LL, cool your jets. First of all, it's only been a year, and secondly, I mean, can you really call Cyberpunk's rise on Steam's review rating a comeback? Going from mostly positive to very positive isn't exactly a meteoric rise, but even so, it's a rise nonetheless, so I'm sure PC players will be applauding CD Red and the improvements they've made to Cyberpunk, but it does feel like the console players have been left in the dark a little on this one. I play on PC, and even from day one I enjoyed Cyberpunk, bugs and all. I didn't love it, but I certainly didn't hate it. I always felt that most people had picked a side, and you either openly ignore the blatant flaws, take to Reddit forums and write in all caps to anyone who had a bad word to say about CD Projekt Red before going to bed in Cyberpunk pyjamas, or you're the polar opposite and you've already decided that it's the worst game that's ever been made. You've taken to Metacritic and given it that review score of 0.5, and you haven't even played the game, so of course I'm going to trust your judgment, and on a weekly basis you set little paper bags of dog poo on fire and leave them on the CD Projekt Red headquarters doorstep.
Poop again!
He called the shit poop!
I'll get you damn kids for this! You're all gonna die!
I've never really seen Cyberpunk as a masterpiece or as a complete disaster. I think it's a fairly decent game with plenty to enjoy and plenty to criticise. I think that so much of the venomous hate though was thrown its way down to the expectations people had before it even released. You can't really blame people considering the amount of money that was pumped into the marketing campaign and the alternative trailers that were far from an accurate representation of the final product.
That's false advertising!
We saw Cyberpunk source code stolen and auctioned online, as well as being pulled from the PlayStation Store, which was something I never thought I'd actually see in gaming, and then a year later, the GTA Definitive Edition was pulled from Rockstar's store too, so I'm praying this won't become common practice for developers, but before I go on a massive rant about that, I think it's best I just stay in my lane for this video.
We have to be mature, but we can't lose the spirit of childlike wonder.
So come on now, let's just keep it about Cyberpunk and, jokes about flaming bags of dog poo. If you're interested, you can check out our original review we put out shortly after its release last year if you'd like, but what's actually changed since then? The biggest issue I had with Cyberpunk from day one was the driving mechanics. My muscle memory instinctively went into GTA 5 mode when I first hopped into a car and hit the streets of Night City, and even though I think CD Red tried to emulate that intuitive and incredibly fun arcadey style driving mechanics that you find in GTA, they completely botched it. There was far too much oversteering, nowhere near enough sensitivity when driving at high speeds, and the minimap view was so zoomed in that the GPS waypoint line became pretty much pointless if you're driving above 50, giving me barely half a millisecond to turn in time when I needed to make a sharp left or right. And there's so much driving to do, as you'd expect, so with the mechanics being so poorly optimized, I just felt discouraged to even get in a car, even with all their cool gizmos and funky cosmetics, and then when I had no choice, I was sending myself and the citizens of Night City into insane fits of rage with my impossibly bad driving.
What is your problem, man? Do you know how to fucking drive? No. What? No, I don't know how to fucking drive. I don't know what any of this shit is, and I'm fucking scared.
Thankfully though, patch notes 1.2 and 1.3 did fix a lot of this. They added a new slider bar for driving sensitivity, which did fix a lot of the oversteering, but don't forget each car drives differently to begin with, so it wasn't exactly a perfect solution, but it was a definite improvement. The minimap is much more user-friendly too, being more zoomed out, so no more licking it past my destination and having to bang a UE on the highway. Overall, the driving experience has been massively improved on, so your typical A to B journeys are far more enjoyable now, and you can even bust out some pretty intense high-speed handbrake turns without humiliating yourself into a 900-degree donut spin.
Now that's how you're supposed to drive! From that one, that's how you drive!
Another note in patch 1.2 was it is no longer possible to perform gorilla arm finishes against civilians. What? You've done what? Why on earth would you remove that? It is beyond me. Because going around and admiring the one-of-a-kind beauty and extraordinary fashion sense of these Night City citizens before gorilla fisting them into oblivion, that was an extremely pleasing pastime for me.
Do me a favor. Turn around for me.
Okay.
No, go the other way.
Okay.
Now obviously you can still go around causing mayhem, but I was a little disappointed to see the ability to guerrilla finish off a citizen being removed, but hey, maybe I'm on my own with that one.
I'm a psycho.
Now, they were my personal favourite improvements from the patch updates, and I'll stick in a link in the description for anyone interested in seeing the full patch notes. They have fixed a lot of the worst bugs, those that were doing the rounds for a good laugh, like the T-pose stand and falling through the map and other various bugs, but there are still others sadly, but they're far less frequent. The respawning of vehicles and NPCs is still way too obvious, and in some places it feels worse than it did before, but that's clearly to accommodate for this stability issue that's ingrained into Cyberpunk. A lot of the things that have been fixed are what you'd expect to have been resolved in-house before it even hit the markets on day one, and only on PC is this game in a state where I'd recommend it. I like Cyberpunk, in fact there are times where I'd go as far as saying,
I love it, but I just don't love it.
On console though, it's still nowhere near good enough and has been totally neglected. Let's be straight here, this game was built for PC, and that was obvious when the original reviewers were forced to review it on PC only to begin with. CD Red knew it's just not playable on console. It's more than obvious that it's still not up to scratch. The visual downgrade between even a low-end PC compared to the base consoles is far too big. Night City has been stripped of liveliness, with barely any citizens or vehicles roaming the streets because they were so strongly tied to the instability and the frame rate issues.
Where did everybody go?
To put it simply, this just should not have been sold on consoles, seeing as the gameplay experiences between the various platforms is so drastically different. Those Cyberpunk trailers were packed with immersive and bustling street life, and in big bold letters at the end of the trailers it'd say, out December the 10th on all platforms. Then to completely strip out huge core elements of what was so enticing about Cyberpunk to begin with, and it's still struggling to even be playable, and that just leaves console players to wander the completely deserted streets of a city that was supposed to be one of the biggest selling points. It's just disgusting business practice, and so far from being customer friendly, it's untrue.
I'm disgusted with everyone.
Having said all that though, I am genuinely looking forward to seeing what the PS5 and the Series X next-gen versions of Cyberpunk can offer, but I'm still a little concerned. You know full well these upcoming next-gen versions will be put under the microscope and scrutinised beyond belief, but CD Red have only really brought that on themselves. I play on a 3090, and asking for a consistent 60 FPS on high settings without using DLS still isn't possible all over the map, and that's because Cyberpunk is still one of the most demanding games ever on current hardware, and should be replacing Crysis for the honour of that phrase. Yeah, but can it run Cyberpunk? No, of course it fucking can't.
What are you, fucking mental?
Now the future of Cyberpunk can only get better, surely, and CD Red have shown they're more than capable of making good games and being devoted enough to fix anything that needs attention. We may never see a truly polished version of the game considering what foundations have already been set in place, and these could never get changed. There's rumours of patch 1.4 being bundled into patch 1.5, and it'll be some kind of super duper mega update, including a barrage of fixes and improvements, and this all coincides with the release of the next gen version. That's exciting, and maybe we're gonna get somewhere closer to the original vision of Cyberpunk 2077. And then there's the DLC expansion set for the first quarter of 2022. Again, I'm excited, mainly because the size, the quality, and the fact that the DLCs in The Witcher 3 were free, well, they went such a long way in CD Red earning their amazing consumer-friendly reputation they had before Cyberpunk's release. I'm hoping we can see that same approach again. The base Cyberpunk story was fantastic. It was amazingly written with some memorable characters, and even the side quests, they were so emotively impactful that you could almost justify them to be good enough plot lines within a main quest line. That's CD Red's signature right there, but what they really let themselves down was the promise of player choices throughout the game. The illusion of choice was there, but once you'd passed that first hour of gameplay, all three intro options all led to the same place pretty quickly. Beyond that, it was some forgettable dialogue choices being available to certain character types that made very little difference to anything, and some alternative endings that again were the same for each character type. I'd love to see the DLC put more meaning on picking either a corpo, a street kid, or a nomad character. There's still huge replayability though, mainly within the skill tree and where you decide to invest your skill points, and that still remains to be the biggest draw when it comes to replayability. But I'd love love to see something more when it comes to the story side of things and the choices that we make. Another thing that absolutely needs adding, and shouldn't be too difficult to either, is adding some interactivity within the city. Throw in some mini games like arcade machines, let's go bowling, let's go to the cinema, some extra merchants, and let me interact with the citizens more. It's such a beautiful city, but it just feels like, oh yeah, you can look at this incredibly stunning city, but
No touching! No touching! No touching! No touching!
So if you're on PC and you've never played Cyberpunk, I'd still recommend it. Invest in the story, invest in the characters, and you'll still need to show some leniency towards some visual glitches and the odd bug and immersion-breaking AI moment here and there. That would be my advice on PC, take it or leave it, but on console, I'd steer clear, to be honest, and wait for the next-gen versions and see what they bring to the table. I really hope this DLC brings something we've not seen in Cyberpunk before too. Some new gameplay mechanics and RPG systems would be nice, even if I'm asking for a lot. It'll likely be the same base game with a new storyline, but there's no harm in hoping. Well, actually, I think there probably is harm in hoping when it comes to Cyberpunk, so I'll be on my guard when that DLC trailer drops. I really hope CD Red have learnt their lessons from the development of Cyberpunk, and I hope they use those lessons going forward in the potential future of The Witcher 4 too. Until then though, I'll see you in the next one, Tubers. Peace out.